Well, first, I really appreciate y'all having me today. This is the first time I've given this kind of talk before. And the way I usually talk, one, I was a speech major at University of Montebello, so I've spoken several times, all those things. I enjoy it. But the way I sort of like to position these type of talks really is interactive. So if you have any questions, whether it be about the history, whether my time with the Barons or a variety of different, whether it be the Rickwood, I know everybody, obviously been to Rickwood or Hoover Met or Regents Field. Certainly happy to talk about any of those things. Like I told Gary, unless there's something sensitive, and there's a few things that might be sensitive, yet at the same time, for the most part, it's not going to be. It is a fun, obviously, it's baseball in Alabama and Birmingham, all those things. But a little bit about myself, I'm originally from Fairhope. I'm not from Birmingham. Grew up down in Fairhope when it was much smaller and there was not a lot there, but really enjoyed it. The inside sort of story is that I think my Nelson family is one of the founding families of Fairhope. My great-great-grandfather was at a butcher shop and all those type things. But growing up down there was great. My parents had a deli, and so I worked down there. Went to the University of Montebello, was a speech major, and then ultimately parlayed that into an internship with the Birmingham Bulls when they came back in town in 1992-93. So that was my one experience of working for Art Clarkson, the legendary Bulls, Barons, and minor league owner in these parts. And then I transitioned that to an internship with the Birmingham Barons in 1993. And then that was Terry Francona's first year. And so we ended up winning the Southern League Championship. So you get a ring out of your first year. That's pretty cool. The second year was 1994 for me, and in 1994 was when Michael Jordan was with the Barons. So you get a ring your first year, you get the experience of Michael Jordan the second year. It's hard to believe I did baseball for all those years. So it was really a labor of love, and basically I continued and worked with the Barons through 1996. My ultimate goal was to be a broadcaster in baseball. I want to be the next Vin Scully. And then when you realize that, it's like when you realize you don't have the talent to play professionally, when you realize you don't have the talent to pursue maybe a broadcast career, you had to go a different route. And so I abandoned those dreams when I went to Detroit, and I worked for the Tigers in 1997. Worked at Tiger Stadium and loved everything about it, even though Detroit is a different sort of speed from Birmingham and from Alabama. I loved every minute of it. It was quite different. Had an opportunity to come back here. I was getting married at the time. Still married to my wife, Christy. She grew up not too far from here. But after that, came back to Birmingham, promoted to assistant general manager, served in that capacity from 98 to August 2004, and then I was promoted to general manager when Tony Enzer, who was the previous general manager, moved on to Colorado Springs within the ownership group we were working with, and he went to AAA, and then I was general manager, president general manager from that time until June of 2025. So it was really a lot of fun. A lot of things happened in those 20 plus years of during my time of leadership with the Barons, whether it be the last several years at the Hoover Met, a variety of different playoff teams and caliber of players and managers, all those type things, and obviously the move downtown to Regents Field, and all that went into something unique with that, which I always was told that you're not really a true minor league general manager until you build and design and part of a research and develop a minor league ballpark. I never bought into that, and today I still don't buy into it, because you could be a general manager of a minor league baseball team and not have that experience. But it was really fun. It was really unique, and those kind of experiences will always stay with you. And again, I'm happy to. So if you have any questions, raise your hand anytime. There's no real flow to this. But when you're talking about baseball in Alabama, obviously I'm from Alabama, as I mentioned, and being from the South Alabama, Fairhope, as you know, is right across the bay from the city of Mobile. And so I was born, my first year of my life was I lived in Mobile. And so if you know anything about Mobile, there's two things the Mobilians are very proud of. One is the birthplace of American Mardi Gras. Badge of honor, to say the very least. And the other is the most Hall of Famers from a city. And really, it's the city only behind New York and Chicago when it comes to the most Hall of Famers. And so growing up, that's what I learned. The Bowling brothers, Milton Frank, obviously the Aaron brothers, Tommy and maybe the bigger known, Hank Aaron, obviously, Billy Williams, Ozzie Smith was born there, Satchel Paige, Willie McCovey, Stretch McCovey. And the list goes on. Unbelievable, the caliber of players that are from the port city. And so that's always a badge of honor. And it was fun growing up. I went to a lot of different events that had a lot of those players that would show up over the years. And they were always very proud of Mobile. Even when I positioned Ozzie Smith one time, he was just like, listen, I only was born there. I grew up in, I think, California. But he was still proud to be from Alabama and from the Mobile area. But obviously, the state hails so many great players, whether it be Hall of Famers or players that played in the major leagues or minor leagues for so many different years. Some that come to mind, Early Wynn, he was the first Cy Young Award winner for the White Sox in 1959 and from the state of Alabama, and Monty Irvin. Obviously, Willie Mays, who we all know, Westfield, and from these parts. And so the list goes on. Joe Sewell, Don Sutton, Don Mincher, Bo Jackson. Again, you can go on a laundry list of all these different players. And it's really remarkable that the kind of players that came through Birmingham or came from Alabama and went on to stardom at the biggest stage of all time. I mean, Joe Sewell, obviously a Hall of Famer, Joe Sewell Thomas Stadium over in Tuscaloosa, named after him. But an incredible career with multiple teams. And then when you look at Alabama too, is that I'm a history of baseball kind of guy, despite the fact of working in baseball from 93 to 2025. I appreciate the history of baseball probably more than most folks. And I hate to say it, I would prefer to watch a retro game from the 1980s or even the 1990s than a game from today. I still collect baseball cards, not the modern hologram stuff, but the vintage stuff. So I really love the history. And so when we used to work the Rickwood Classic all those years, it was my favorite event all those years. But when you look at baseball in history in Alabama, it's amazing sort of the variety of different leagues and teams and players that obviously came through here. But, to me, one of the first leagues that you would have to look at would be the Industrial League, which was a feeder league for the Negro Leagues as well as for Major League Baseball as well here in Birmingham. And, you had a SIPCO, U.S. Steel, Willie Mays and his dad played on the same team, Fairfield Stars, I believe that's what it was. So it was Piper Davis, Sam Harrison, who I worked with for years. He was actually the first black player signed by the White Sox, even though Minnie Minoso will always be considered sort of probably the first black player in at least he's noted in that organization. But Sam Harrison from these parts, and obviously a legacy, so many different generations. His son Jerry Harrison went on to a great major league career with the White Sox, and obviously a couple of his grandsons too in Major League Baseball. But that Industrial League is something very special because you really captured, it had companies and, communities that were involved, but it captured some of the best talent that came through. And scouts were always at those games at Rickwood Field. So it's amazing. When we did, we started the Rickwood Classic. I'm going to sort of shift gears and say the Rickwood Classic with the Barons, if you're familiar with it. It's a vintage game we started in 1996. And it's a great game. You wear the vintage uniforms, you celebrate a different era, a different team, different players, all those type things. And so we did it in 1996. It was incredible. And then for the first several years, I think that everybody loved it. Yet at the same time, it's like anything else. It might lose its luster, lose its shine a little bit, and attractiveness to a lot of folks. And so it went through a time where attendance was down because we were, trying to figure out, okay, does it make sense to do it on a Wednesday or a Thursday afternoon, or even we tried on a Sunday afternoon one time when we did the Birmingham Barons for the first time. But so it went through a lull, but in 2004, we focused, and our theme was the Industrial Leagues. And we did a SIPCO versus the U.S. Steel. And at that point, we had Huntsville Stars versus the Birmingham Barons. And if you look back at that game, you'd be like, whoa, Prince Fielder played first base for the Huntsville Stars that game. And you had several other players that went on. Tony Gwynn Jr. played for the Huntsville Stars at that point. Darrell Evans, who played a number of great Major League seasons for multiple teams, the Atlanta Braves, San Francisco Giants, Detroit Tigers. He was the manager for that team. And so that's when there became an uptick in the Rickwood Classic. And so people appreciated that history, that connectivity. Now, let me tell you, those uniforms, the ASIPCO uniforms, the U.S. Steel uniforms, were probably the least attractive uniform sets of the entire Rickwood, all the different uniforms that we've done. Yet at the same time, we packed the house that day. And I remember being overcast and all those type things. But it was incredible because people really enjoyed it. And so, again, a very important league in the grand scheme of things, for Major League Baseball and the route for Alabamians to get to the big leagues, as well as the Negro Leagues, which was obviously the big leagues for black players. So ultimately, another league that occurred was the Alabama-Georgia League, which was a Class D league, which I always completely fascinated with, if you really want to know, because it really included some of the smaller towns, the Anistons of the world, LaGrange, Selma. It was amazing, and I would have loved. To me, when the minor leagues are always referred to as the bush leagues. To me, that has to be the definitive answer of what the bush leagues would be. These small towns and these very amateur players. But to me, it's incredible. And at one point, when I was still assistant general manager with the Barons, I wanted us to focus and do a game on the Alabama-Georgia League, because I think that would be super cool and to attract those markets and give them a day in the sunshine of being professional baseball again. Yet at the same time, we never did it. But anyway, that's one of those really cool sort of hidden sort of history type things when it comes to professional baseball in Alabama, to where not a lot of people know about it. Now, obviously, you also have the Southern Association that occurred for up until 1964, which was the original version of what would then be the Southern League in basically 65 or maybe 64, 65 until basically 2020 and Major League Baseball took over. In the Southern League, which I worked in for a number of years, obviously the face of what that league and the territory, the footprint changed dramatically over the years. When I first started, the Southern League, you had Greenville and you had Zebulon, North Carolina, and you had Jacksonville. You didn't have Montgomery. You had Huntsville. You didn't have Rocket City. You had Chattanooga. And I always looked at, when it came to the Barons, is that really the two, I guess, consistent teams or organizations or cities within that Southern Association, Southern League, were Chattanooga and Birmingham. And that's why I always loved Chattanooga, because the tradition of what both of those teams were to those communities, the unique names, the Lookouts and the Barons, and really, even though the Lookouts became more of a cartoonish type logo and sort of overall uniform scheme, more of a traditional, unique to that community as well, obviously for Lookout Mountain and all that. And the Barons, I'm not sure the absolute genesis. I know they were the original coal Barons, if I'm not mistaken, when they played at Slag Park. But to me, that's one of the cooler things about the Southern League. But when you look at it too, is that you look at some of the minor league cities in Alabama, they've pretty much been consistent, whether it be obviously Birmingham being sort of the anchor of all those things. Huntsville has come and gone. Obviously Rocket City has a minor league team there today. Huntsville started, I guess, back in the early to mid 80s when they were affiliated with the A's, when they had Jose Canseco and Mark McGuire and Terry Steinbach and Walt Weiss, all those guys. And then Montgomery joined the party, I guess, around 2003, I believe, is when they came on board. They were gangbusters for a long time, and they were a well-run organization. Mobile, my hometown, they had a team for many years. Obviously, they date back to when they played at Hartwell Field, when they had the Mobile Bears. And so they were affiliated with the Brooklyn Dodgers back in those days. And I guess the most notable player from those days I always heard about was the rifleman, Chuck Connors. He played for Mobile back in those days. So it's really fun and I always wanted to go back to see Hartwell Field, but unfortunately, from all I know is that it's some sort of a plaque nestled in a neighborhood, similar to where the neighborhood of where Rickwood is, but an old neighborhood in Mobile, not too far from Lad People Stadium. So instead of me continuing to ramble, I'm going to open it up and see if you guys have any questions and sort of shift gears here.
Yeah. What do you know about my dad played baseball over across the street and led 4 years. He also played for the, his team was in the Junior American Legion baseball. You heard of that?
Vaguely, yeah.
And it may be along the same lines of the BABF, Birmingham Amateur Baseball Federation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just a tick below what you're already talking about. I didn't know, but talent real talent will trickle up like that. But he never went any farther than that. So I didn't know. And he even made he even played a East-West All-Star game.
Oh wow!
Yeah, at Legion Field.
Very nice.
Yes. So I didn't know any of those.
Yeah, I'm not knowledgeable about that. I mean, I know back in those days you had just a potpourri, a variety of leagues, and there were people could play baseball and continue to try their hand at their dream and see how far they can go and extend to see where they would go. The good thing, a lot of times some of those players could transition to a higher league potentially, and the minor leagues were so much different back then. A general manager would sign the players. Glenn West, who I got to know decently before he passed away, he was basically the general manager, business manager for the Birmingham A's for a long time. And so he would sign the players. But also it changed dramatically. You had that shift probably around the 50s and 60s too, is that you had, major league teams obviously sending players, and more signing players, all those type things. The thing about the Barons too is that, in doing the Rickwood Classic is that, you celebrate different history. The Barons were blessed because the variety and number of affiliates they've had over the years, whether it be the Tigers multiple times, the Reds, the Yankees, the White Sox, the Red Sox, or just the players, the teams, the Black Barons, obviously. It's just one where it's just staggering to see the history that played at Rickwood Field. And that's why, to me, the labor of love was always the Rickwood Classic, because you got to do something. And let me say this, is that, when we do these uniforms, there was a little bit of artistic liberties taken too, because, obviously the records and all the artifacts are not going to be completely accurate and carry over. But it was always fun to be able to bring back some of those eras, because a lot of those players and teams from those eras that whether a variety of different leagues, people forgot about. And so that's why, when we saw that uptick in 2004 with the industrial leagues, I think there was a significant, because it touched so many people personally, whether it be a grandfather or some semblance of a distant relative that played in those games. And so that's why it meant so much for them to come back and be a part of something like that. I hope that the Barons will continue to focus on such themes like that moving forward, because it's for this community, while it probably is not as sexy, so to speak, as maybe as the affiliates with the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Tigers, it is something that I know resonates more intently here in the Magic City.
Maybe an interesting trivia question would be, did Reggie Jackson ever play for the Birmingham Barons?
Didn't play for the Barons, but for the Birmingham A's, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Charlie O'Finley.
Charlie O'Finley. There's so many rumors about that, and I don't know what's true or not, but I always heard the rumors that obviously Charlie O was from this area. Made his, and bought the Kansas City Athletics and looking for a place to move them. And the rumor was, the story that I was always told was that he came to Birmingham with the desire to potentially have the Major League team come here. And then when we showed up at the airport and nobody was there to meet him, that's when he said, they don't care. or we're gonna continue moving and we'll go to Oakland. That's what I always heard, and whether that's true or not, I have no idea. But yeah, those Birmingham A's teams, legendary. And just obviously somebody mentioned certainly the building blocks for those Oakland A's championship teams that won the World Series 3 times in the early to mid 1970s. But obviously the Vita Blues of the world, the Reggie Jacksons, the Bert Campaneris, the Raleigh Fingers, Joe Rudy, all those guys, they played. Catfish Hunter didn't play here. We got into a sort of a deep dialogue one day about that. But ultimately, and then John McNamara, who obviously was a great baseball manager for a number of years, specifically for the Angels, in the 80s, and then of course, he managed the Red Sox in 1986 when they lost a very heartbreaking Game 6 and ultimately Game 7 to the New York Mets. So ultimately, when it comes to Birmingham, it's so fun to look back, and I always would say that, we can't really promote the players that we have on the Barons roster because you never know if they're going to stay here tomorrow, they're going to be promoted after the game, or how long they're going to be here. But it's also interesting to see who played against us during our time as well, because you would be shocked at the volume and caliber of players that just came through here and people really didn't even notice whether it be Ellie De La Cruz just a few years ago. Matt McClain, obviously not too far ago. When we opened Regents Field, Puig was a rookie in the Dodgers organization, or he was cutting his teeth, and he was in Chattanooga. Jock Peterson was on that team as well. So it's amazing the type. Even in my first year as general manager, I think. It was when I was assistant general manager, but Miguel Cabrera was with Carolina when he was coming up with the Marlins organization. But ultimately, it's staggering the volume of great players that either came through and played or just from this state as well. What other questions do you guys have?
I got one.
Go ahead, yeah.
So locally here, kind of what Dennis was mentioning, right on the other side of the Colorado Rivers, where kind of Little League kind of started over here about 1956. And when I was doing some research for a book, it felt like, at least in newspapers, it kind of felt like it came out of nowhere. Like there was all of a sudden this just like massive fervor for creating Little League and baseball in the city. I asked Art Black about this, and he just told me he would encourage me to look into the 1955 World Series. So I'm just curious from you, like the Brooklyn Dodgers finally get over the hump. They win in 7 games in 55. It was the first, I believe, the first World Series televised in color. How big of a deal was that World Series nationally? And I mean, obviously it's touched here, and I know local stuff, but like how big of a deal was that World Series for baseball across the country?
Well, I mean, baseball at that point was the focal point. I mean, there was, I'm not the most knowledgeable when it comes to history of other sports, but I know that there was no Super Bowl, there was no NBA, there was no NHL, there was none of that kind of stuff. But ultimately, when it came to baseball, that's why, with Alabama, as we all know, well-versed is that, and I'm on board as well, is that Alabama is obviously a college football state, always has been, always will be. But I would have loved to have been not a fly on the wall, but a spectator to go to Rickwood Field back in those days when they would say the trolley would drop you off at Rickwood Field. When the focal point was, a game in the social event from what I always heard about. Whether it be, to me the Barons would be cool, but the Black Barons game would be the ultimate cool thing to attend if you could go back in a time machine just to see, because obviously when it came to Barons games, you had, the black attendees that would sit in right field, and then for the Black Barons games, you'd have the white attendees sit in right field. So it would just be the reversal. To me, it's just fascinating to see what baseball was in this state, and how much of a focal point and social aspect of what it came to be. There's a mural when we designed Regents Field. We wanted to make sure that we really focused on the history, and I think that was one thing when I first took over as general manager. It was one where when we introduced the Barons Hall of Fame, because I felt like, yeah, we did a good job of promoting Frank Thomas and obviously Michael Jordan, or other recent players, Jack McDowell, whoever it was. But I don't think that we ever did the best job of promoting, and obviously other notables as well, the Reggie Jacksons of the world, or Raleigh Fingers, or even Mule Suttles, and other Willie Mays. But I don't think that we ever did the best job of promoting a variety of different history of the details, since the Barons have been around since 1885. But ultimately, it's amazing just to see how baseball worked in this city for so long, and it's incredible that Rickwood Field obviously opened in August of 1910 and closed after the season of 1987. It's amazing how that continues to sort of have a pulse, be relevant, and obviously is even more revered than it ever has been before. A couple of years ago when Major League Baseball came into town, I was, certainly worked with Major League Baseball for over a year leading up to it, with all the different details, whether it be, the Barons had a game on, I think it was on Tuesday, and then the Major League game was on a Thursday. But it's incredible. Major League Baseball has done an incredible job, and you got to give credit to Rob Banford for establishing that the statistics are on an equal plane of the Negro Leagues, on equal plane with Major League Baseball, which I know it's very difficult to do, because one, that history, records, all those type things, whether it be the Barons or the Black Barons, history. They don't have the databases for that from 1910. But ultimately, to be able to shine a spotlight and to really promote Birmingham in 2024 on an international stage, and give proper props to the Negro Leagues in addition to equaling the playing field when it came to statistics, is something that I'm really thankful Major League Baseball, because, when I first started in baseball, the Negro Leagues was certainly appreciated and revered on several different levels, but I think it's taken a different level in the last several years, just because people recognize now what these legends, these gentlemen went through, and their contributions not only to the game, but obviously to America as well.
This is not a question, but it's really just sharing a story that I love about my father. Who, he had baseball in his blood. I didn't take after him there, but he was in. We're just saying, in his high school years, it was prom time. He was dating my mom at the time, so they all went to the prom with his best friend in his day. Well, the prom was at the Thomas Jefferson Hotel in Birmingham. Mm-hmm. Well, while they were there, they happened to get on the elevator with a couple of baseball players, and my dad and his friend are elbowing each other. And they spent quite a bit of time, instead of with their dates that night, chasing autographs, because the Brooklyn Dodgers were staying in the hotel.
Oh my goodness!
And so I have in my family heirlooms an invitation, a prom invitation that has autographs by Pee Wee Reese and Ruth Walker.
Oh my goodness! Amazing. And you're talking about the Brooklyn Dodgers, one Alabamian who probably doesn't get enough props, as far as I'm concerned. We do have a picture, a headshot of him in one of the sections at Regents Field, but Dan Bankhead. He was a roommate of Jackie Robinson, from this state, first, black pitcher. For the Brooklyn Dodgers, and the second black player for the Brooklyn Dodgers. So he's a guy that definitely, Piper Davis too. I was lucky enough to meet him in his last years. Know his daughter Faye decently, and just that's why when you look at the Birmingham Black Barons, and especially the 1948, and obviously Reverend Bill Greason, who was certainly focused on and given his due props. And we actually did something with one of the senators a few years ago prior to one of the Rickwood games, and it seemed like it had to have been around 2014 or 15, whatever it was. But anyway, I'm so glad that he's finally getting his due props, and because he definitely deserves it. And that legendary team, Piper Davis. If you know anything about Piper Davis obviously was one of these like world-class athletes. Not only did he play at the big league level and the manager and player for the Birmingham Barons, but he was a Harlem Globetrotter. Unbelievable. And he's quite a character of the game too. And I know that, if you listen to Willie Mays and to, what he would credit, and I know that he gave a lot of props and credit and appreciation to Piper Davis when he was playing for him with the Birmingham Barons in that 1948, team. Yes, ma'am.
Pretty much answered my question what I was going to ask you. My husband, when he grew up, his dad had about 6 Rickwood Fields.
Mm-hmm.
And he remembers the Black Barons. And most of those black teams already resolved on the time you had gotten involved.
Oh, yeah. Basically, once Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, that's when it really started to, the foundation really started to show a lot of cracks. They kept I'm not going to pretend to be the most knowledgeable about the history of the Negro Leagues, but I know the Negro Leagues continued in a variety of different fashions for many years. I think the Barons had their first integrated team in '64, I believe, somewhere in that vicinity. We celebrated that with one of the Rickwood games. And but ultimately, because the integration of professional baseball, it ultimately led to the dissolving of the Negro Leagues. But it's one where I'm just so glad that it's got, and I know Major League Baseball, their intent is to not do the Rickwood game every year, Major League game, but to do it every few years and celebrate it. I know they were looking at several different ballparks, one in New Jersey and then and obviously Rickwood Field. But I'm glad. I think that they should, quite frankly, celebrate the Negro Leagues every year more than doing a Little League celebration at the Little League World Series or some of the other stuff that they do. I just think that the Negro Leagues are that important to baseball.
I watched that documentary too on TV about the black teams and stuff and what they were doing. It's amazing how they put it together and were able to attract the crowds they did.
Oh, absolutely. And one thing too is that, when during my time, I'll be honest with you, is that, we did the first Rickwood game, we celebrated the affiliation of the 48 Red Sox, and then the next one we did the affiliation with the Tigers in the 50s. The next one we did the Birmingham A's, and then the next one was the Birmingham Barons. And one thing that we recognized over the years is that, how much when people go to the Rickwood Classic, how much they appreciate, respect, and just want to be around the Negro Leaguers that were alive. And so when I took the reins of what my role was, knowing that is that we started to incorporate a pregame honoring and celebration and really just recognizing the living Birmingham Barons before every Rickwood game. Not only that, but when we hosted the All-Star game in 2009, the first one and only one we ever did in Hoover, which was very unique to say the very least. We did a pregame celebration with the Negro Leaguers there, and quite frankly, we did, and I can go into that more if you want to. I wanted to make it more of an event, so we did a home run derby and a celebrity softball game the day before at Rickwood Field. We made it a 2-day event, and then we did the game at the Hoover Met on that Monday night. So I wanted to make it more of an event, so make it so people could really look forward to it. But when we did the pregame celebration with the Negro Leaguers, that was the largest, applause that we heard the entire, 2 days because people just appreciate and respect their contribution so much. And so we did that.
Keep it alive because it's quite a history and it's Like I said, what I watched was when I enjoyed it so much.
It's so important. It's so important to not, I mean, to Birmingham, but obviously to the entire nation. But we did it, again, when we hosted the All-Star game in 2018 at Regents Field. And it brought down the house again. And so it was one where definitely intentional about it. And over the years, so lucky my first several years, like I said, getting to meet Piper Davis and so many other great Negro League legends. But obviously, Father Time is undefeated in our life. And so, unfortunately, between COVID and I think Father Time and just everything else, we've lost a lot in the last several years. But at the same time, there's just they were and not only was it great to see people recognize them in the most positive way, but that meant so much to them. And they would show up. I think it might have been even, I don't know if it was opening night at Regents Field, but it was one of the first games that we did at Regents Field where we had a picnic for them and invited them to sign autographs if they wanted to, and they always wanted to.
So you said that, and we all know baseball used to be this big social thing, but have you seen, just kind of looking at present and going into the future, baseball games used to take forever, and then you add on these rules that makes the game faster. Mm-hmm. But I remember because I'm from Tallahassee, Alabama, so we used to go to Biscuits all the time. And now it's turned into, hey, nobody has to go to a Biscuits game or to a Barons game. Y'all want to go to watch Banana Ball. And the games are on a time. So do you think that normal baseball is kind of dipping in attendance because people prefer the theatrics of Banana Ball?
I think, obviously in the last 5-6 years under Rob Manfred, Major League Baseball has done a really good job of I don't want to say modernize baseball, but certainly probably adjust some traditional rules and just the overall operation of the game, whether it be the pitch clock or a variety of other things to help speed up the game to make sure that people are paying attention, are just enjoying the entire game. I think all those things are positive. Now, again, I'll go back to what I said earlier, is that I'm a traditional baseball person. And so I remember meeting with a representative with Major League Baseball when they wanted to install the pitch clock at Regents Field. And I sort of used that as my opportunity to tell him how much I was not happy about all these different rule changes. But anyway, it was sort of humorous in some way. But I think the rule changes have been good for baseball. I'm not if you have an extra inning game, I'm not a fan of putting a runner at second base. I want a game. If I'm at a big league game and it's extra innings, I never want to go home. I mean, that's the beauty of what the game is. And I don't like clocks. I don't like all these things. I understand the pitch clock because instead of David Ortiz adjusting his batting gloves, 20 times, you got to, step up and get this right. So I get that. And so for me, even though I was against it, I'm the biggest turncoat there is. And I compromised because I was like, man, I got skin in the game here. I can go home a little bit early if this pitch clock is working. And so, but we had some bad teams too, some years. So they didn't really, the pitch clock is good when you can throw strikes and get outs. And when you can't, doesn't really matter. So, and we had some of those teams, over the years. But I think that with Banana Ball, we had them 2 years ago, and it was funny because in negotiating with them and all that, I had never seen them before. I knew about them, obviously, but I've never seen their production. And when they came into town, they're great to work with. They're very, show and go, very relaxed and everything. But it is beyond impressive, the machine that they turned into. Because when they were here, I think it was 3 years ago, like I said, is that Jesse, their founder, told me, he goes, listen, our vision is to expand to 5 to 8 teams, playing big league stadiums, NFL stadiums, whatever it is, and that's what they're doing. I mean, they just got finished playing at Yankee Stadium. They played at Fenway. I think they played where the Titans play in Nashville. So it's beyond impressive what they're doing. They're connecting baseball to a different generation, which that kind of connectivity of doing through social media. But you're seeing them a lot more. I mean, I've seen them on TV or at least that they were going to be on TV multiple times this past week. I think last night as well. So I think it's positive. When I saw them for the first time when we had them 3 years ago, it's amazing because to me it's a cross between a circus, a Broadway show, and just you name it. I mean, you had the second baseman is a rodeo clown sitting on a barrel in short right field, and people love it. And if people are having fun, that's what baseball's all about. You could have I'm not a fuddy-duddy to where it's got to be, okay, well, statistics and baseball and all that kind of stuff. Baseball's supposed to be fun. Going to a ballpark is supposed to be about memories and about positive experiences. And that's what, it's just a different level. My son, who is 24 years old, he's actually in baseball. He's working for a major league team right now. He vehemently is against Savannah Bananas, and just because he's like, it's travesty, it's sacrilegious, and I'm like, just
He's a purist.
Yeah, he is a purist in the truest sense, and I'm just like, hey, listen, I don't know where you got that from, but you need to get over it and just enjoy it, okay? So I get that you're into all the statistics and player development and all that kind of stuff, but please give it a chance. So, but I think it's great. I think it's great. What else?
What was in the water in Mobile?
It's a good question. Unfortunately, I didn't take a sip of it. But again, there hasn't been many. I mean, Jake Peavy's from Mobile, obviously. I mean, he had a great major league career. He came to Birmingham a couple times and rehab assignments with us. But it's amazing that, back in those days, and Satchel Paige, the old story, and a young Hank Aaron who, you look at him, he's a 17, 16-year-old kid, whatever he was, getting on a train and going to wherever Indianapolis, I think, maybe, or I'm not sure, but ultimately. Yeah. I mean, it's just amazing. But Alabama, just the caliber of players that have come through is beyond staggering, and then the ballparks too. I mean, I think that Birmingham clearly has the best of all worlds. To me, I always would internally say it's sort of like the Christmas Carol of all cities, because it's the ballparks, the ghost of Christmas past with Rickwood. Distant past, past with Hoover Met, and the present day, not the future, but the present day with Regents Field. Mobile had Harwell Field, like I said. I would have loved to have seen that. Like I mentioned, Hank Aaron Stadium opened in 1997 when the Bay Bears, and the Bay Bears had to go with the Bay Bears, include the Bay Bears instead of the Mobile traditional Bears, because I think there was a bear, the Yakima Bears, in a different Northwest league. So they couldn't go with the traditional Mobile Bears, so they went with the Bay Bears. And then, of course, like I said, Huntsville, they had Joe Davis Stadium for a number of years. Not the broadcaster, but I don't know who Joe Davis was in Huntsville, but ultimately, and then they relocated to Biloxi, I guess in 2014, and then ultimately, they had Rocket City. I can't remember the exact year, and they have a great ballpark up there. I remember, when they were looking at, this was not publicized, but when they were looking at getting a team there, is that, I had to show the mayor and the executive director for Madison around Regents Field, and I don't know if that sold them hook, line, and sinker, but they loved it. And then, of course, Montgomery, when Tom Dixon and Sherry Myers, when they brought the Montgomery Biscuits into Montgomery, that was certainly a game changer for that community. And they've done really good. They recently went through another ownership change, but they have the same management. Murph down there does an incredible job, and just think the world of him. And but they have a great ballpark too. If you've ever been to it, they basically refurbished and incorporated a ballpark into an old train station, which is super, super cool. Yeah, Riverwalk Stadium, yeah. So, yeah. Well, and that's what, it's like Gary asked about parking and all that kind of stuff at the Hoover Met. It's when you go through a relocation from the Hoover Met, give you some background on that. We hosted the All-Star Game in 2009, which again, that was something that was very unique, and I was very proud of what our staff did. But 2 weeks after that is really when the ball started getting going on the discussions with the developer and the mayor at the time for Birmingham was Larry Langford, about the potential. And then you go through that process. I got hooked into that quickly. And then you went through a feasibility study, and then that was put in the Birmingham Business Journal. And it was probably, let's just say, 30 questions. And one of the very hidden questions nobody paid attention to was, would you support a ballpark downtown? And if it came back negative, the Barons would still be at the Hoover Met. But it came back positive. And then that's when it was sort of off and running. And so you go through that sort of process of visiting other minor league ballparks and going through all those meetings of design, development of what you would want, which was really, really a lot of fun and very satisfying. When you go back, I was with the Barons for over 32 years. A lot of fun, some really unique experiences, but 2013 will always be my favorite because of everything that went into what that move was. We actually got the certificate of occupancy on a Monday, and then our opening day was on a Wednesday. So you had less than 48 hours to move into the ballpark and to get the ballpark open. So when we moved into the ballpark, it's opening day, we got the alcohol license on opening day. Jeff Logan went to go get it. We turned on the beer system for the first time. Beer shoots through the walls. Concessions. I know that was if you sort of go back and you start to remember, concessions was a problem back then. Well, one, Regents Field was about 80% complete. We didn't have any kind of permits for any kind of portables. The outfield bar and the Dreamland and concessions in the outfield were not built yet. And so you go through something like that. We're moving in computers, paint's drying, all that kind of stuff on opening day. But in the end, you got through it. And it was a dream season for me because so much went into it. Our entire staff, ownership, everything like that. The community loved it. You knew that it was not an original recipe, something unique for Birmingham. And it was not going to be a risk because you knew that when you have, whether it be at the major league or minor league level, and you go from a suburban ballpark setting to an urban ballpark setting, that the economic development can really start to grow and really, the trickle down effect and just the ripple effect is incredible. But we knew that it was going to be something very positive. And to me, again, not being from here, but knowing that Birmingham sort of has a chip on its shoulder about doubt, frustration, about seeing their regional neighbors. Obviously, Atlanta, a major international city, been that way for a long time. Nashville continues to grow into being a major national city. Memphis, an NBA team, AAA team, really good city. Whereas Birmingham obviously continued to sort of stay in place and not really continue to grow and excel. So I think that when Regents Field, along with the entertainment district, that's, I guess, next to the BJCC, Uptown District, and then the West End Hotel, all three of those things occurred in 2013, which really, not just one, but all three really helped put some momentum into this unique revitalization of Birmingham. And to me, that's the most satisfying thing. So in 2013, one of my favorite things was I remember walking around the concourse early in the season, and I'm behind this family, and they look at each other and they go, "Can you believe we're in Birmingham?" And I'm like, wow, that's quite a statement. I hate to hear that, yet at the same time, it's cool because there's a recognition that things are on the uptick here. And we ended up, clinching the first half of the division. We had a great team that year. Manager Julio Vinas, always a dear friend of mine. Marcus Simeon, who's gone on to a really great major league career. He was the Southern League MVP that year. He was just a first-class individual. We had a lot of great players on that team. Trace Armstrong, Jared, Chris Bassett was a big pitcher that year. It was a beyond special year. Britt Burns, obviously, was a great high school player in these parts, great major league player as well. He was our pitching coach. But it was the most satisfying year for me because in the end, it was one where, we clinched the division, we won some awards, we won Ballpark of the Year. We actually edged out other Major League teams with Ballpark of the Year award, even the New York Yankees, believe it or not, because they went through some major renovations. But people recognized what Regents Field was, and it instantly became, the reputation for the ballpark really grew immensely because of the way we designed the ballpark. And if you look at it, the seating bowl is designed after Rickwood Field. The light standards are designed after Rickwood Field. And again, me being a history of a baseball kind of guy, I love the fact that you have all the modern day amenities of Regents Field for the fans, the open air concourses, the variety of different concession stands, all those things. Yet at the same time, you incorporate the history, whether it be the images of former teams and players, or whether it be the seating bowl, the unique seating bowl of what Rickwood Field was. And Rickwood Field was designed by the same architect who did Forbes Field in Pittsburgh, where the Pirates used to play many years ago. So, but ultimately with that season, we won a variety of different awards. We're Southern League Organization of the Year, which was great and very satisfying. But ultimately we ended up playing Mobile, who was vying for their three-peat at that point, and they had great players on that team. They had Nick Ahmed, who went on to, obviously, a great Major League shortstop for a number of years with the Arizona Diamondbacks. The manager managed in the big leagues for Gary for a long time. But they had a great team. And we played the Cubs affiliate in the first round, which had Javi Baez and Chris Bryant and all kinds of other guys. I'm not a Cubs fan at all, obviously. But ultimately, we were not supposed to win the first round. We go to the max in a 5-game series. We won Game 5 in Sevierville, Tennessee. So we advance to the championship. We play Mobile, my hometown team, and I'm like, oh man, come on. Because the last time we lost to Mobile in the playoffs a few years earlier than that, I was reminded of it at Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Mardi Gras by family and friends, and I don't like to lose. So ultimately, we won the first 2 games in Mobile, and I'm like, oh my goodness, here we go. Let's get the rings going. And we dropped the next 2 in Birmingham, and then that decisive Game 5 on a Sunday night, we ended up winning in dramatic fashion. So it was very satisfying. It was the storybook, because you open your inaugural season with all the fanfare, all the goodwill, all the excitement, and then you close it with a championship. And then we were off and running at Regents Field. What are the questions?
I got one more.
Yeah.
2024, the Tuesday at Rickwood. The day we found out Willie Mays had passed.
Mm-hmm.
I still don't have the words to describe it being there and finding out that news in that stadium. Where were you? How weird of a day was that for you?
We ended up, that was a very unique time for me. We ended a homestand on Father's Day weekend on that Sunday, and then people from Major League Baseball were already here, the week before. And so I was juggling 2 balls. We ended up, I think, raining out on that Saturday night, or Friday night, which complicated things. But ultimately, not only did we have all of the events and the games of Major League Baseball occurring that next week, but the new ownership, they had a huge, meeting in town as well. So there were a lot of things sort of hitting me from different angles. When it came to that game, we moved into Rickwood Field, into the clubhouse, all those, and the Barons took one of obviously the Major League clubhouse. They were really incredibly nice. But it was fun because you knew what it meant for this city. Despite the fact I was on fumes, I'm always on fumes after a homestand. But you knew that it was incredible. So by the time we got to Friday and the Major League game was over, I don't know if I got out of my lazy boy all day long. But ultimately, when it came to that game that day, it was beyond special when it was announced. And the dialogue, there was so much dialogue leading up to that week about whether Willie Mays was going to be here or not. There was somebody at the gym who said, listen, Willie Mays should be here. You need to get him here. I said, I have nothing to do with it. He goes, if Joe Biden can be the president and he's old, Willie Mays can be here. He's old. It's like, well, I don't think it's that simple. But it was one of those where, obviously everybody wanted him. We actually partnered with ESPN Classic. I think it was in 2006. It might have been 2007, in which they did a made-for-TV game, which with the Birmingham Barons and the Bristol Barnstormers. And ESPN is their headquarters in Bristol, Connecticut. And so they brought in Willie Mays for that game on that Sunday night. So it would have been really cool and apropos. I know Willie Mays' son was here all week, but when they announced his passing during the game, you sort of, your hairs on the back of your neck stands up because you're like, wow, we're celebrating and honoring the Birmingham Black Barons because of Willie Mays. The Giants, and they're playing a major league team in town in Birmingham at Rickwood Field because of Willie Mays, and he passes away that week. And then they unveiled, if you've seen the mural on that Wednesday, that was the buffer day. It's downtown. I can't remember. It's right next to where the bus depot is, if you know where that is. But it's a beautiful mural of Willie Mays in a Birmingham Black Barons uniform, and it has some stuff on it about his MVP or Rookie of the Year or other notable accomplishments painted on the wall. But it was one of those surreal weeks where it just seemed like if there was ever a time to where it seemed appropriate for his passing, it would be when you're recognizing and celebrating and honoring the Black Barons and him hand in hand at Rickwood Field where he played in his, essentially hometown.
What moment out in your baseball career really takes your breath away, just knowing that you're part of it?
What moment?
Whether it's meeting a big name or being part of
they're working in the game, and I'm not in baseball right now. I'm working for a great PR management consulting company here in town. So it was a blessing, the part of the coolness of what that was. I would go to the winter meetings every year. I'd go to the fall meetings, whether it be a leadership position in a variety of different ways within the league or whatever. But you would be privy to meeting. And to me, that's why when you do the Rickwood Classic game, those details, to me, the secret recipe of what the Rickwood game is, and we tried we tried different days, did giveaways, did a variety of different themes, whatever it was, but the recipe that made it successful, that people appreciate, would be coming up with a quality theme, a different era, a different theme every year, and then, really cool uniform set, and then bringing in a celebrity guest where people can appreciate. I know that, over the years, and it really took a long time to figure that out. I know some of the more popular guests that we had, believe it or not, were not some of the more Hall of Fame. To me, my goal was always have the guest have a high caliber, ideally a Hall of Fame, player. If not, somebody who was a great baseball player, because you wanted that caliber to reflect of what that event was. Because well before Major League Baseball came here, it was a national story. Jim Capel, the late Jim Capel of ESPN, wrote a story back in the early 2000s, the 101 sporting events you must attend before you die. 2 were from Alabama. Obviously, one is going to be the Iron Bowl. The other was the Rickwood Classic. And that's pretty significant. But to have that caliber of guest always, and we had some great ones over the years, the Minnie Minosos. And to me, a lot of times when you would get to have those guests, sometimes it would work out to where you'd have dinner with them, either before, or after, whatever it was. And so there were times where I had lunch with Willie Mays, not one-on-one, but with maybe another person or two, and, Minnie Minoso or Tommy John, whoever it was. Over the years, Gaylord Perry, Dwight Gooden, Darryl Strawberry, whoever it was. And to me, that was the fun part, because to be able to put all those things together, if the weather worked out at Rickwood Field, you knew the fans would really enjoy it. People take a day off, dress up, possibly, but just enjoy taking a step back, because that game would always connect so many different generations. This is where my grandfather, my grandmother, my great aunt, whoever it was, would take me when I was a kid. And to be able to share that experience is just something that we have uniquely here in Birmingham, and none other places have. So, but some of those unique, to me, obviously, Michael Jordan was very unique in being able to interact with him. But favorite experience, I'll go back to 2013, and I think for me, it was the euphoria of winning the championship, not because the family and friends would shut up at home, but because it meant so much. It was the storybook ending. I remember waking up on that Sunday morning, and I was so I knew some insider information. I knew what the lineup was going to be, all that kind of stuff. And I was not too happy because I'm like, we've lost the momentum. We're going to lose the dream season, all this stuff. And I'm sitting there with my wife in the outfield. I try to get away. When we're in the playoffs, I was really focused on it. And so Mobile, they had, the kid played for the Atlanta Braves too. He's an all-star outfielder. I forgot his name, but ultimately he knocked in a run first inning. And so Mobile went up, and I'm like, here we go. We're going to choke this thing away. And so I go up to my office, and I'm like, I'm not watching the game anymore. I can't watch it. I'm too nervous. And so I was answering emails, all that kind of stuff. And so finally I worked up the courage around the 5th or 6th inning, and I found out, wow, we're winning. And so we ended up, but to be able to win the championship your first year in an inaugural season was just storybook. And to do it with Julio Vinas, again, the manager who was a player in 95, who came back to be a manager for several years with us. And then the players, Trace Thompson, our center fielder, his brother is Clay Thompson, Michael Thompson, his dad, in the NBA. So you had that I've never seen the team on the field and the front office team connect so sort of intertwined. We would all walk across the street after the game and enjoy a beer or two over at Good People. And it was just one sort of happy-go-lucky season. And to be able to cap it off with a ring and a championship is just something you'll never forget. And part of it too was, that was the first time we won a championship while I was in that position. And so part of that responsibility of being a general manager is that you get to sort of lead the design of what the championship ring would be. I'm like, whoa, I'm not a jewelry person, but that's pretty cool.
You get one too?
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, everybody in the front office definitely gets one. What other questions might you guys have? Well, I really appreciate it. It's always fun. And if you have any questions, whatever it is, like I said, I'm always happy to answer any questions. Some might be better than others, but at the same time, I was blessed to work for the Barons for a long time. I'd like to think that we did some really good things and kept the tradition of the Rickwood Classic and did a variety of different things to help the city and to give back and to be good community partners. That was always my goal. And I feel like that we did accomplished a lot of those things. I think that you could always do a lot better. At the same time, I think that, they're in great hands right now, and they're going to continue moving the ball forward. And the tradition continues. And the great thing about the Barons organization, obviously been around since 1885 in a variety of different forms, but ultimately, this is a city that loves. You've seen obviously a lot of teams come and go, whether it be pro football or basketball or hockey or whatever it is, and that's great. And we want as many teams here in town as possible. Yet at the same time, the Barons have been the one common denominator that has always been here, whether it be the Birmingham Coal Barons, whether it be the Birmingham Barons, Birmingham A's, the Black Barons, whatever it is. And so just, the tradition continues, and look forward to more, big days at Regents Field, and of course the Rickwood game moving forward as well. So thank you very much.